Commissioner for Human Rights. And I'm meant to be moderating today, but for obvious reasons I'm not going to. But I wanted to still welcome you all here and thank you for being here and thank our distinguished panel for being here. On behalf of the office, we consider these conversations on sexual and reproductive health and rights in the context of the Council to be really essential for us all to enhance our understanding, to learn from each other's experiences, and to get to a deeper level of dialogue on these important issues. So I'm going to stop there, but really, and thank you to Naureen, who's agreed to step in and moderate. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lucinda, and thank you to our panelists and to everyone who's joined us. Just a couple of background information pieces to share with you all. Firstly, we will have translation of this event in Spanish and Portuguese. The respective channels would be 2 for English, 3 for Portuguese, and 5 for Spanish. And so we'd also like to ask our esteemed panelists and the audience members to, just in terms of the tempo of speaking, to keep in mind that we have translation that will be happening. In addition to that, there's an attendance sheet that is being circulated. So just if you could keep an eye for that, we'd love to hear who's attending this meeting. So I'll jump perhaps into a few different remarks. I mean, I'd like to thank you all for coming today. My name is Naureen Shameem. I work with the Association for Women's Rights and Development, AWID, one of the co-sponsors of this exciting event. And so we're here for We Persist, using human rights law and standards to advance the right to access safe and legal abortion. Thanking especially the Sexual Rights Initiative, who organized this event in support of the September 28th Global Day of Action for access to safe and legal abortion. And this being one of the key events in coalition with, which I'll speak of in a moment, a large civil society statement on the same theme, which is being released today. I'd like to thank also the co-sponsors of this event, which includes the Center for Reproductive Rights, AWID, RFSU, the Permanent Mission of Chile, the Sexual and Reproductive Justice Coalition, the Human Reproduction Program, and the World Health Organization. What brings us here today? So, I mean, a number of human rights bodies have emphasized that access to safe abortion is a matter of human rights, a matter for the Human Rights Council today. They have characterized laws criminalizing or restricting access to abortion as violating the rights to such rights as non-discrimination, life, health, privacy, and the right to be free from cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment. We've also seen states and the establishment of human rights that accountability is required for abortion services to be available, accessible, acceptable, and of good quality, and that states must remove barriers to access safe abortion services. Several countries worldwide currently have laws and regulations that criminalize, prohibit, or in some other way restrict access to abortion, with harmful consequences on the ground, most often for the poor, young, and most marginalized in societies. These laws and regulations violate one's right to make decisions about one's own body. They also fuel abortion-related stigma, deterring access to and the provision of safe abortion. As a civil society statement signed by over 280 organizations and activists on this theme of safe abortion for this campaign notes, around 22 million unsafe abortions are estimated to take place around the world annually, leading to 7 million health complications and 47,000 deaths. There are major social and financial costs to women and girls, families, communities, health systems, and economies. Prohibiting abortion pushes it underground, according to the statement, and gives rise to unsafe abortions, resulting in death and disability, and as aforementioned, violating such rights as the right to life and health. As some of the themes around this event will discuss, states have a duty under human rights law to prevent such harms and to ensure access to good quality abortion services. So launching into now the exciting remarks coming from our panelists. This event will focus on and highlight the ways in which different stakeholders, states, civil society, the UN system, and others can use human rights law and standards to advance the right to access safe and legal abortion. It is intended that this exchange of practices and experiences will inspire further action and collaboration among states, development partners, and civil society towards realizing abortion-related rights for all. And just in terms of the theme and the output of this event, we are looking to, of course, have the opportunity for the panelists all to speak towards their own expertise and experiences. We'll have a follow-up for some Q&A with the audience and your own rich and robust entry points into this discussion, and then close off with the possibility for some closing remarks coming back to our panelists. So with that said, if that's fine with everyone. With that said, I will introduce our first panelist to share her experience of advancing abortion rights. Ambassador Marta Perez is Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Chile to the United Nations, other international organizations, and the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva since 2014. She holds a degree in sociology and is an international expert in human rights, social policy, and multilateral affairs. During most of her professional career, Ambassador Maurás has been associated with the UN system in senior positions, namely in the Office of the UN, of the Secretary General, and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and UNICEF. As well, she served as a member of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child from 2009 to 2013, including as its Vice President. Ambassador Perez, it's a pleasure conducting your remarks.
Thank you. Well, I'll deliver my remarks in Spanish, and I do thank the organizers for providing that facility to all of us Spanish-speaking. But let me just say, first of all, an honor to be with the panelists today. And secondly, the fact that it's only 12 days since President Bachelet signed the law that depenalizes voluntary interruption of pregnancies because of three causes. And I must tell you, my colleague, who's the executive director of the Council on Children, is here with me today because we were having a different event, and she knows that the party was enormous, very popular. We had a huge demonstration of satisfaction by many people. The subtitle to my little speech today is "A Step by the State of Chile in the Recognition of the Human Rights of Women," because that's exactly how we see this very important piece of legislation that is now being put together in terms of regulations and norms. And I will describe a little bit the law itself, but also the very robust deliberative process that took place to be able to really come with during 2.5 years, with a product that we think is really not only very good in terms of quality, very sensitive in terms of rights, and we think that it's not going to be changed in the future much, because it has huge popular support. Y entonces quisiera hablar primero del reconocimiento de los derechos y la dignidad de las mujeres. Ya les dije, el 14 de septiembre, solamente hace 16 días, este anhelo de las mujeres de Chile se transforma en ley. Las tres causales en que la mujer puede acceder a la interrupción del embarazo son, y esto es importante de notar, cuando se encuentre la mujer en riesgo vital, de modo que la interrupción del embarazo evite un peligro para su vida. Cuando el embrión o feto padezca una patología congénita adquirida o genética, incompatible con la vida extrauterina independiente, en todo caso de carácter letal. Y en tercer lugar, cuando el embarazo sea resultado de una violación, siempre que no hayan transcurrido más de 12 semanas de gestación. Pero este plazo se amplía a 14 semanas para las niñas menores de 14 años. Y lo voy a explicar. Con la promulgación de este proyecto y su muy pronta entrada en vigencia, el Estado de Chile avanza, creemos nosotros, de manera contundente en el reconocimiento de los derechos fundamentales de las mujeres y de su voluntad y de su dignidad. Junto a ello, damos un paso adelante en el reconocimiento de la plena ciudadanía de las mujeres, al declarar que en 3 situaciones críticas y graves, como las contenidas en las 3 causales, el Estado no puede imponer una decisión, ninguna decisión, sino que el Estado debe abrir el espacio para que las mujeres puedan decidir cómo vivirán de acuerdo a su libertad, sus planes de vida y sus convicciones más profundas. Además, importante, la ley ofrece, el Estado ofrece a las mujeres una respuesta acogedora, empática y profesional, evidentemente, ¿no? que se convierte ahora en una política pública integral que sea capaz de abordar todas las situaciones en la inmensa complejidad y sensibilidad que significa esta decisión para las mujeres. Y esta empatía y esta acogida por parte que extienden los servicios del Estado de Chile se extiende tanto a las que deciden terminar su embarazo por las causales que hemos descrito, como a aquellas que deciden continuar. O sea, es la decisión de la mujer, o de interrumpir, o de continuar el embarazo, teniendo toda la información y tomando en conciencia esa decisión, la que es apoyada por el Estado. Estamos convencidos de que el Estado no puede imponer un curso de acción. Es un proyecto que no obliga, y esto fue un tema que se discutió mucho en el debate público, este proyecto no obliga a nadie, ¿no? Sino que abre opciones, que no impone, sino que fomenta la autonomía individual. Sea cual sea la decisión, ya lo dije, se le acompaña a la mujer. Somos evidentemente conscientes de que esta ley regula situaciones de vida que son extremadamente difíciles. Pero al mismo tiempo creemos que alivia, que aminora a las mujeres el peso que supone cada una de las situaciones que describimos. Pues se garantiza el acceso seguro, sin ocultamiento, a las prestaciones médicas y al apoyo biopsicosocial que sea necesario. Tratándose evidentemente de un proyecto de ley de tanta importancia y complejidad como la descrita, nos hemos abocado como gobierno con toda seriedad a lo que esto merece. Y el equipo técnico que fue responsable de finalmente llevar a buen término, después, como dije, de 2 años y medio de negociación, es un equipo técnico interministerial compuesto por la ministra del Ministerio de la Mujer y la Equidad de Género, la ministra de la Salud, el ministro de Justicia y la subsecretaria de Derechos Humanos dentro del Ministro de Justicia y la Secretaría General de la Presidencia. Ustedes notarán la presencia inmensa de mujeres en esta iniciativa, empezando por la propia presidenta Bachelet. Nosotros creemos que si no tuviéramos mujeres en altos cargos en el gobierno, probablemente sería muchísimo más difícil, ¿no? Ir adelante con tamaña empresa. Conscientes entonces de que este proyecto implica acciones que rozan la esfera más íntima de cada persona, se permite la objeción de conciencia de los profesionales, del personal que desarrolla funciones al interior del pabellón quirúrgico y también por la institución que acoge a ese pabellón quirúrgico. Y esta es una discusión también muy grande, no voy a entrar en los detalles, ustedes pueden encontrar los detalles de la justificación de la objeción de conciencia, pero la ley lo permite. Quiero describir rápidamente el proceso, ¿no? de la ley. Empezamos en enero del 2015, cuando la presidenta anunció que quería avanzar con este proyecto y que quería un debate con altura de miras. Hubo durante ese tiempo más de 200 exposiciones de expertas y expertos donde concurrieron abogados, abogadas, médicos, profesionales de la salud, diversas organizaciones de la sociedad civil, representantes de los distintos credos religiosos, y esto permitió que los parlamentarios se informaran apropiadamente, no solo de los elementos técnicos, sino también del parecer de muchos sectores de la población, y formarse entonces una convicción razonable y fundada para poder votar de acuerdo a esto. Además, creemos entonces que con esto realmente cumplimos uno de los objetivos que hemos tenido desde el año 1990, cuando recuperamos la democracia, que es robustecer la democracia, por supuesto. Y debo decirles que además muchas organizaciones civiles de la sociedad civil internacionales nos apoyaron en esto. De hecho, Human Rights Watch, por ejemplo, fue uno de los testigos en el Tribunal Constitucional, y su parecer de Human Rights Watch es que probablemente no habría sucedido lo que sucedió en Chile en 2 años y medio si no hubiera habido este proceso consultivo tan robusto, tan abierto, tan transparente y tan transversal. Además, un altísimo nivel de respaldo de la ciudadanía. Todas las encuestas realizadas durante todo ese periodo de 2 años y medio mostraron invariablemente que cerca de un 70% de la población apoyaba este proyecto de ley. Por último, quiero decir que toda la discusión, el debate y el trabajar en este proyecto nos dio una oportunidad adicional muy importante, que es hablar sobre la violencia contra las mujeres y mejorar las respuestas que ofrece el sistema de salud. Puedo dar un poco más de detalles más adelante, pero lo que sí quiero decir es que se produjo un diálogo abierto por primera vez en Chile sobre el tema de la violencia contra la mujer, sincerando la conversación acerca de la violencia, sobre todo la que sufren las niñas, y las niñas en particular menores de 14 años. Todo el tema de la violación, ¿no?, fue muy debatido, pero es el que abrió la compuerta para ligar los temas, ¿no?, y traslucir el hecho de la violencia. No voy a dar muchas cifras, usted ya dio las cifras, pero sí lo que queremos decir es que lo que conocemos es una parte muy pequeña de lo que efectivamente pasa en términos de el peligro que corren las mujeres cuando deciden abortar en un sistema que las pone en la cárcel si lo hacen. Y además afecta diferencialmente a menores de edad. Después sigo porque se me acabó el tiempo, pero sí quiero recordarles a todos que una de las cuestiones que quizás también fue muy importante para nosotros fue ligar la discusión con los estándares y los parámetros de derechos humanos de los cuales el Estado de Chile, ¿no?, está totalmente comprometido. Quiero decirles, y eso es todo, después más adelante. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much to Ambassador Perez. I think it's given us rich food for thought, and especially interesting to hear in regards to the new legislation and the entry into force of law, the consultative process and the fact that it was the conversation on safe and legal abortion was connected very much to conversations on violence against women, as well as sexual violence, including women and against girls, as well as connections to various number of human rights standards which are implicated. So moving now to our next panelist, I'd like the pleasure to introduce Dr. Franzlina Pinto-Romao, who is a founding member and the current vice chairperson of the Sexual and Reproductive, who is a health counselor at the Mozambique Mission in Geneva. Yes. She is a medical doctor with 30 years of experience working as a public health officer, from the district up to the central level of the Ministry of Health, dealing mainly with issues related to women, adolescent and child health, as well as the integration of a gender approach in healthcare provision. And have had the pleasure of seeing you in other panels as well. I'm looking forward to your thoughts right now. Thank you.
Good tarde. É a primeira vez que falo em português nas Nações Unidas. Estou muito feliz. Geralmente falo em inglês, mas é claro que falar em português é muito mais fácil para mim. E eu espero que vão entender tudo o que vou dizer. Um bocado de contextualização em relação ao assunto que estamos a discutir sobre a interrupção voluntária da gravidez. O meu país ficou independente em 75 e até lá a legislação existente proibia pura e simplesmente a interrupção da gravidez e a resposta era prisão, tanto para os indivíduos envolvidos no ato, como para a própria mulher grávida. Entretanto, em 1981, depois de alguns anos de experiência, os médicos repararam que tinham um grande afluxo de mulheres com o aborto em processo. Nunca se investigava se era natural ou se era provocado. A verdade é que as mulheres ficavam muitos dias internadas, algumas morriam, outras faziam infecções, tinham complicações graves. Então começou-se a pensar na possibilidade de dar oportunidade delas fazerem o processo de interrupção nas unidades sanitárias. E é nessa altura que o Ministro da Saúde emite um decreto em que permite que as mulheres, em casos de risco de saúde e falhas contraceptivas, façam a interrupção da gravidez nas nossas unidades sanitárias. Só precisavam de fazer uma declaração, porque às vezes o marido podia, se não soubesse da decisão, podia vir atrás de nós com a lei. Então era prevenção, mas ela precisava de assinar um documento em como era de livre vontade para que o assunto pudesse ser encaminhado e a interrupção realizada. Estou a falar muito rápido? Esta pergunta é para os tradutores. Então, estimava-se que havia cerca de 11% de mortes maternas devidas à interrupção insegura, não é? Feita nas condições mais bárbaras que nós podemos imaginar. Então, nesta perspectiva, o país quis mudar o cenário. Começámos a fazer consultas a diferentes grupos da população, sociedade civil, para ver o que é que pensavam. E foi um processo lento, porque entretanto introduzimos o documento no Conselho de Ministros, que aprovou, mandou para a Assembleia e de repente muda o governo. Novos membros da Assembleia, novos membros do governo, o processo volta atrás. E nós muito frustradas porque já tínhamos, digamos, acendido as velas, não é? E gelado o champanhe a contar com a vitória. Entretanto, como o Código Penal estava em revisão, de repente foi tudo aquilo que nós tínhamos proposto introduzido no novo Código Penal, que foi em 2014. Eu penso que a senhora embaixadora já falou tudo sobre os direitos humanos das mulheres, não vou repetir. Talvez só referir muito brevemente que esta questão está relacionada com o direito à vida, direito à saúde, acesso aos serviços de saúde, à liberdade, segurança pessoal, à autodeterminação, ao direito de decidir sobre o número de filhos e o espaçamento das gravidezes, enfim, há um rol de situações que estão ligadas ao aborto. Nós seguimos o protocolo de Maputo, onde 15 membros naquela altura ratificaram, que estipulava num dos artigos que os Estados-membros comprometem-se a adotar medidas apropriadas para proteger os direitos reprodutivos das mulheres, particularmente através da permissão de abortos médicos em casos de agressão sexual, violação, incesto e quando a gravidez põe em perigo a saúde mental ou física da mãe, ou a vida da mãe ou do feto. Assim diz o protocolo de Maputo a seguir. No nosso Código Penal, o aborto é punido, mas é despenalizado nos casos especiais definidos. E o artigo principal diz que é despenalizado o aborto efetuado por médico ou outro profissional de saúde habilitado para o efeito ou sob a sua direção em estabelecimento de saúde oficial ou oficialmente reconhecido e com o consentimento da mulher grávida em determinadas condições definidas. E então o Código define quais são as situações em que é permitido. Em caso da gravidez, constituir ameaça para a saúde física, psíquica e mental da mulher. Em caso de malformações fetais, em caso de a gravidez ter resultado de um crime de violação sexual ou relação de incesto, e quando for praticado nas primeiras 12 semanas de gravidez com o consentimento da mulher grávida. Também estipula a idade, até as 12 semanas em geral, mas pode ser até 16, as primeiras 16 semanas, se a gravidez resultar de violação ou incesto, até os 24 semanas, em caso de previsão de doença grave ou malformação congénita do nasciturno, e sem limite de idade quando se deparar que é uma questão de vida e morte e tem que se fazer a interrupção para salvar a vida. Os procedimentos, há sempre uma certa burocracia envolvida. Segundo a lei, certificação por atestado médico, escrito e assinado antes da intervenção por 2 profissionais de saúde, consentimento prestado pela mulher grávida, ou o seu pedido de documento assinado. Tem que haver sempre uma assinatura pela própria mulher. Em situações de emergência não se exige o consentimento e há sempre necessidade de exames médicos. Na regulamentação está-se a pensar em simplificar o processo e em formas de minimizar a intervenção de 3 profissionais de saúde, que é o que a lei exige. Está-se a desenhar formulários de fácil preenchimento, porque muitas das nossas mulheres não sabem ler e escrever, e formas de suprir o consentimento de menores incapazes em caso de conflito com os seus representantes legais. E muito obrigada pela atenção.
Thank you so much to Dr. Amal for sharing your experience, and especially in regards to the specificities of the decriminalized aspects of abortion and the ways in which there are attempts being made to address some of the issues of underage women, and again, its connections, as you clearly articulated, to a number of different rights in that framework. Thank you. So if I can then move to our next panelist, to speak about her experience of advancing abortion rights in South Africa. I'd like to introduce Dr. Thelane Mofokeng, who is a founding member and the current vice chairperson of the Sexual and Reproductive Justice Coalition in South Africa. A medical doctor, she presents and co-produces a sexual health web series, is a resident doctor at a South African radio station, and has a weekly medical column in a newspaper as well. She is the winner of the 120 Under 40 New Generation of Leaders in Family Planning Award, awarded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population and Reproductive Health, and has been recognized by the Mail and the Guardian as one of top 200 young South Africans, and by Destiny Magazine Power of 40 for 2016. So please, it's my pleasure to introduce you, Dr. T.
Good afternoon, everybody. My experience with abortion in South Africa is one of a service provider because I'm a medical doctor and had some undergraduate training where I was first exposed to the equitable need for women who are choosing to end their pregnancies for a multitude of reasons. And in South Africa, we've got the Choice on Termination of Pregnancy Act of 1996, which really gives the conditions of who and when and under what conditions a termination of pregnancy can take place. And in keeping with today's theme of using human rights law and standards to advance the rights to access safe and legal abortion, I've decided to start my opening remarks just as a brief introduction to all of you on what the law in South Africa currently is like, and just to highlight some of the deficiencies despite having this incredible law. In our Bill of Rights, Section 24, the state recognizes that everyone has a right to health care, and it specifically says including reproductive health care. And the fact that it had to be put in as an extra already is telling of some of the issues that and some of the attitudes we're already dealing with. The preamble to the Act recognizes the value of human dignity, the achievement of equality, security of person, non-racialism, non-sexism, and the advancements of freedom rights and all freedoms which underlie the democratic South Africa. And the Constitution protects the right of persons to make decisions concerning reproductive health. And it actually recognizes further that the state has a responsibility to provide reproductive health care for all, and also to provide the safe conditions under which the right to choose can then be exercised without fear or harm. And this is in line with our Bill of Rights. Now, the issue with South Africa is that, despite this very progressive law, and if you look back in 1996, it was indeed a significant step in the right direction, because this act was deliberately repealing the Abortion and Sterilization Act of 1975, which under those conditions of apartheid and with the history of colonialism, it was an important step as a democratic country to take and to explicitly state the state's responsibilities with regard to access to health care. The issue for me is that, with the current slogan of not leaving anyone behind, often we do leave people behind. We're leaving disabled people behind. We're leaving people who are in the extremes of age behind. Africa is very big on the demographic dividend, but from where I'm sitting, it's the demographic dividend for as long as the statistics of governments look good, for as long as young people are seen to be contributing to economies. But it's not demographic dividend based on human rights for those young people to choose and have governmental support to then exercise whatever their choice is. So, and those are some of the limitations. We're leaving lesbian women behind, for example, who are still being questioned by service providers. How are you pregnant but you say you are a lesbian? And that further stigmatizes people and stigmatizes the service itself. We continue to leave transgender people behind as well. And also sex workers. In South Africa, sex work is still criminalized, which means the state is choosing parts of women or parts of people's lives which are deserving of dignity and care. So a person who's already criminalized and stigmatized because they're a sex worker has a very low chance of presenting to a healthcare system in a timeous manner. They may not always be free to fully share their history, whether it's a medical history or a past medical history, or even a lifestyle information to their healthcare provider, because already parts of who they are criminalized, and that does have an impact on the ability of people to access services. And the range of patients that I see, it's not the typical narrative of young, reckless young people. I think often, sentences such as, young people mustn't use abortion as contraception. It's repeated so often in South Africa that people are starting to think that actually starts to make sense, and it's actually fact. And whereas it's actually completely a contradiction in terms in the very first place. And I think what we're working with towards the Sexual and Reproductive Justice Coalition is creating enabling environments where people will be able to fulfill their human rights and have access to service. Because the Bill of Rights that we have, which is supported by the Choice on Termination of Pregnancy Act, needs specific funding and budgeting so that the system can actually work. And it's only if you have equitable access to services and a human rights and a human resource, in this case, people who are well trained, who have good bioethics, who have good clinical acumen. It's only when the policy, the law, and equitable access really succeed that only will you have justice. And we need to, as civil society, start asking questions around funding, because a lot of countries, especially in Africa, are rich in minerals, are rich in land, are rich in natural resources, but those resources are not benefiting the citizens of those countries. And we need to look at the histories of African countries and how it is that we become dependable on Western countries or on donors for really basic services and for the upliftment of people's human rights. And how that funding comes with conditions like in my country, South Africa, that are completely unconstitutional. And yet, year after year after year, decades, it is allowed to happen. And you now have a current system that is so good at self-gagging that it doesn't matter that a democratic US government is in power. We are so used to that system of self-gagging and restricting abortion care, restricting information that's being given out as part of a nationwide public health campaign, for example. We're so good at self-gagging and really do poor training of undergraduate medical, whether it's nursing or doctors, and completely neglect the postgraduates who have been service providers and dedicated for decades, if not more, some of them, giving this service. And therefore, the questions that I, myself, personally are grappling with is how the system itself is part of violence, how the system itself is an enabler of people's human rights to not be realized. And unless as civil society we're working together within the different advocacy spaces, whether it's legal spaces, whether it's research, whether it's training, and of course funding. We need to be doing work together to hold all of our governments responsible for whatever clause or for whatever money or for whatever decisions. And often, attempts by foreign governments to import their own national government's programming, for example, and have no understanding of the intersecting oppressions, like a country like South Africa, where even in Johannesburg, you've got multiple pockets of poverty, just simply because of how budget structures were done in terms of townships and the CBDs. So, to then use the typical monitoring and evaluation tools is not necessarily going to work in South Africa, and you are continuously going to leave people behind, despite the millions of dollars, for example, in the response to HIV, and how, we only look at HIV as a single issue. In the words of Audre Lorde, no one lives a single issue life, and unless we realize that abortion is such, and we cannot wait for people's human rights to be violated, for example, in a form of rape or violence or incest, and then only governments decide that, well, now that you've been raped, now you can deserve your human right to choose what to do with your body. And so that's where I'm at as a service provider, but in terms of someone who's working in advocacy spaces in civil society, those are some of the issues and the themes that I'm currently concerned with.
Thank you so much, Doctor, especially for speaking in regards to the ways in which some more insidious ways, like self-gagging and imposition of different planning programs, can themselves have a significant impact on the ability to access, and also speaking towards the impact of intersecting discriminations in terms of the actual ability in real life to access safe and legal abortion. Thanks so much. And I think we'll now move to our final panelist, who I believe also has a PowerPoint presentation. I'd love to introduce Brooke Ronald Johnson Jr., PhD. Ronnie Johnson is a social scientist in the World Health Organization's Department of Reproductive Health and Research, and the UNDP, UNFPA, UNICEF, WHO, World Bank Special Program of Research Development and Research Training in Human Reproduction. He is a technical lead for the Global Abortion Policies Project and is engaged in providing technical support on safe abortion to WHO member states, United Nations treaty monitoring bodies, and various civil society groups. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Naureen. Is this on? Right, so, all right. So, it's a real honor for me to be on this desk with these distinguished colleagues today, and I want to thank SRI for inviting me to participate in this panel. as Naureen said, I work in the Department of Reproductive Health and Research, and we do have a small team of about 4 or 5 people that work on the issue of safe abortion. We produce guidelines on safe abortion. We, in collaboration with the Guttmacher Institute, produce estimates on the incidence and safety of abortion. And in fact, the estimates on safety are about to be released later this week in conjunction with 28th of September, International Day for Safe Abortion. We also coordinate and conduct research, and we provide technical support to countries. I guess this policies project really falls in between providing technical support to countries and being a storehouse of information for the world on abortion policies and laws. It's been a real labor of love, started back in 2014, and it was launched in June of this year, and we're quite excited about it. I've got a presentation because I want you to see some of the screenshots of the actual interface. But before we get to that, I'll just start there. Okay. So many of you will be familiar with these documents. They were produced by our colleagues in the Population Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs at the United Nations. The UN has gathered information on the legal grounds of abortion and some related policies as part of the United Nations inquiry among governments on population and development, starting with the 6th inquiry conducted in 1987. So since 1987, the UN has been keeping track of abortion laws. You may be more familiar with the wall chart on laws, which is the left-hand document, and then an analysis of some trends in legal reform in the middle. And then back in the early 2000s, there was a 3-volume set published that looked more in depth at laws and policies for all the countries of the world. So the policies database, the vision for the new database was to update abortion laws. But to go beyond that, to provide new details about legal grounds for abortion, such as gestational limits and other access requirements, third-party authorizations, requirements for mandatory screening and counseling and waiting periods and things like that. And to expand beyond laws and policies to also include country sexual reproductive health and rights indicators and international health and human rights standards, and to put all these policies into that context. The ultimate goal of the database is to both inform and transform perspectives on improving abortion access and quality of care around the world. By presenting comprehensive data and the source documents on abortion laws and policies for all countries, the database aims to enhance transparency. These laws are often difficult to find, and once you find them, they're difficult to understand, and they're all there now in black and white, at least as much as we've been able to find them. The database also highlights policies that conflict with WHO health standards. Its aim is to highlight policies that conflict with human rights standards, and to highlight policies that lead to inequalities in access and quality of care, and to promote state accountability for women and girls' health and rights in the context of abortion. We've envisioned that the users of this database would be policymakers in countries, as well as human rights bodies. We're planning a series of briefings next year with the UN treaty monitoring bodies on this database and on some of our analysis of the concluding observations that we're currently doing within the database. Hopefully it'll also be of use to many of you in this room, to sexual reproductive health and rights initiatives, and of course to researchers. All of the information in the database is linked to the actual source documents, of which there are about 1,000 in the database. We've also provided information on the types of sources, whether they be penal codes, criminal codes, abortion-specific laws, reproductive health acts, general health acts, and then we also have national standards and guidelines all on safe abortion where they exist. Currently, the database has information on, I've got there 197 jurisdictions, but 191 jurisdictions have laws that cover the country, and then there are about 6, 7 federal states which have subnational jurisdictions where abortion is regulated. So examples of this would be Australia, Mexico, the US. We have the subnational jurisdictions for Australia and a few others, Bosnia, Herzegovina, the United Kingdom. We're about to start getting data for Mexico, of which there are 32 states. We currently only have Mexico City. And then the US with its 50 states, well, that's sort of on the back burner at the moment, just because of the complexities of the law and the rapidity of change in the US. There are quite a few missing subnational jurisdictions, as I mentioned, mainly from the US and Mexico currently. And also missing are the dependency jurisdictions. Many territories, dependent states, autonomous territories, states in free association with other countries are not there yet, but we hope to get them as time moves on. What did I do? There's something more. There we go. No. Okay, we'll go back. The inputs from 85 countries. When we retrieved all this information, it took about 18 months to retrieve this information. We checked and cross-checked, and then we sent all of the information templates to countries for their review and comments, and asking them for documents that we couldn't find, etc. We got responses back from 85 countries, so that was actually better than we had expected. The database, so what's in it? So we've got, for all countries, abortion laws, policies, penalties for women, for providers, and for people who might assist the woman to have an abortion. Standards and guidelines, all juxtaposed to WHO guidance on safe abortion, sexual reproductive health and rights indicators, all of the signed and ratified human rights treaties for each country, and all of the concluding observations and special procedures that have been produced on abortion since 2000, of which there are quite a few, approaching 500, I believe. So, now I just want to quickly, just as sort of a way of ending this, to go through some of the interfaces of the web. This is the home page, and you'll see tabs at the bottom there for methodology and questionnaire. You can click on the methodology tab, and there's a paper on there that explains how we actually retrieved the data and encoded it. The questionnaire is under the questionnaire tab, so you can see the 30-question questionnaire, as well as the mechanism that we used for coding that questionnaire. You can do all sorts of country comparisons, regional comparisons of the legal grounds, different guidelines, etc. This is the top of a country profile, so you can see that for this particular country, the green checks represent treaties that have been signed on the right, where the sources of laws come from. This has only one concluding observation from CEDAW, and then the penalties, which in this country's case apply to the woman, provider, and helper. When you click on the CEDAW, you will get a link to the actual document where the concluding observation lives, and then you can also actually go directly to the extract on abortion. This is an example of the template for legal grounds. You can hover over the checks and it will tell you the gestational limits for that particular legal ground. And then additional requirements are below that. Third-party authorizations, conscientious objection, mandatory counseling requirements, etc. There's also templates for health standards, where abortion can be provided, etc. This is an example of clicking on one of those check marks. It'll explain the legal ground and then provide the WHO guidance on that particular issue. And then a unique feature of this database is that it provides lots of additional notes and nuance about the legal grounds, because all health grounds are not the same, all life grounds are not the same, or any of the others. And for everything that is in the note, you've also got the source document there. You can click on that, and that will take you to the place in the document where you'll find that information. So now we've got the policies. We hope to keep this thing updated on a quarterly basis, and with 5-year systematic engagements with countries. Now we leave it up to you and fellow researchers to try to generate evidence on how these laws are actually applied in practice, because that's always the big question, and hopefully that evidence will lead to some policy reform, progressive reforms. These are the websites. The WHO website is the top, and then it's also to be found on the UN's website second. We've just published a paper. I've got about 25 copies of this paper that was published in the bulletin, which explains everything about the website. And I'd like to thank the many, many people that have contributed to this. It's been a monumental effort, and hopefully it'll be a resource that is enduring for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. Indeed, as you mentioned, this Global Abortions Policies database is a labor of love. I think it's been very exciting to hear the significant resource to policymakers, civil society, and human rights bodies with respect to both national and subnational policies, and their implication for states' adherence to human rights standards on the issue of safe and legal abortion. So we are now moving into the questions period of this event. Could I launch that off by bringing it to our panelists with a question for whoever might be interested in responding, which is, for all of you from your manifold and deep experiences, what advances would you like to see, specifically, for instance, at the UN, at the Human Rights Council, in relation to abortion-related rights? And I can just open this up for whomever would like to go first. Yes.
So, well, we welcome this engagement with the Human Rights Council through this forum. There's several things that we at WHO would like to see at the Human Rights Council. First, we'd like for the Human Rights Council to become more familiar with the WHO guidelines, safe abortion, technical and policy guidance for health systems, which is our guideline on safe abortion, as well as this policies database, and to use both as tools to inform their debates, decisions, resolutions, and UPR with countries. We would like to see the Council more effectively incorporate the recommendations on safe abortion from various special procedures, such as those of the Special Rapporteur on Health and the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women in Law and Practice, especially the recommendations from the Working Group's April 2016 report, which was given to the Human Rights Council, which had some very progressive statements about abortion. We'd like the Human Rights Council to convene a thematic debate or panel discussion on human rights violations arising from criminalization of sexual and reproductive health, including abortion and the denial of access to safe, legal abortion. And finally, we'd like the Council to engage more with WHO in an effort to work with member states on better implementation of Human Rights Council resolutions and UPR recommendations. It's one thing to make all these recommendations, the treaty bodies do it all the time, but implementation is always where sometimes things fall between the cracks, and WHO is prepared to work with countries to try to help fill some of those gaps.
So coming from my side as part of civil society, one of the biggest things is the shrinking space for civil society organizations to participate in UN processes. And I was just horrified at the last vote that my own country, voted in support of such a clause, quite distressing. So that's what I would, it's probably wishful thinking, but we probably need more, work amongst each other as civil society to strengthen each other's voices and causes. And also realize amongst ourselves that it's no use just fighting for one issue or one person, in terms of profile, or a certain person's, sort of life, stage in life. We need to be fighting for all people all the time with all of their rights realized. And I think we're probably stronger doing that as civil society when we come into spaces like the United Nations, rather than coming with our own little individual spaces, because individual issues, because really the fight is for one person. And it's one person just at different times of their lives, but it is for one person. So the right to dignity, bodily autonomy, economical resource to access your rights, that's everyone's human right. So I think that would be the main thing, is to resist the shrinking space for civil society to participate and have some form of accountability mechanisms that the United Nations, can hold the member states accountable, because really otherwise it's just a song and dance. We come up with all of these non-binding resolutions, and there's no accountability, and we just keep repeating the same things, year after year after year, and maybe see young faces in the United Nations, and we can speak to our own issues, our own lived experience, as opposed to people evangelizing or moralizing our lives and our experiences. So perhaps, we need that change to happen quicker.
Thank you. Well, I must say I would repeat word by word what Mr. Johnson has said in terms of aspirations for the Human Rights Council. But of course, to begin with, I think it's very important that WHO makes available and known to all of us that there is this database, that there is the possibility of comparing policies and pieces of legislation, and and that we can learn, therefore, from what has been happening in the different countries. And you said there was about 1,000 responses, and that's certainly very rich. So that should happen, and I'm sure that WHO can put itself to do that in collaboration with the Office of the High Commissioner. With regard to the other three elements that well, of course, better implementation of UPR, absolutely, I agree with you, except that UPR recommendations have a tendency to be a bit generic, not be specific enough, and therefore not be applicable, or interpretable, shall we say. And therefore, it's upon us, member states, to be able to make, very concrete recommendations in the UPR process that then the countries can take back and actually, put to the test of actual implementation within the frames that they operate. And that, again, may require some help from technical entities. We have been, Chile and others, we've been, defending the idea that the 169 targets of the 17 SDGs could be a good way of helping us. But of course, in terms of maybe in terms of the rights of women, we can get much help from the 169 targets, but not so much in terms of safe abortion. But then I come to my third point, which is that to really get a debate going and have recommendations from the Human Rights Council, some time needs to pass. Because this is, as we said at the beginning, inextricably linked to the rights of women. There are many aspects of human rights that relate to safe abortion, but it's the rights of women and girls, the ones where we need to frame this discussion. And the rights of women and girls is a battle that we have not yet won. And therefore, let's take it step by step, I would say.
Obrigada. Eu concordo com todas as propostas que foram feitas e queria talvez enfatizar que o diálogo interativo entre os Estados-membros e no âmbito dos pontos da agenda 3, 5 e 8 com mandatos especiais também podem levar a que se discuta cada vez mais o assunto e chegamos ao processo da revisão periódica universal com uma outra abertura à discussão dos direitos sexuais e reprodutivos das mulheres. Se nós conseguíssemos usar todas as portas, todas as janelas para discutir os direitos sexuais e reprodutivos das mulheres, penso que iríamos avançar mais depressa.
Thank you again so much to our esteemed panelists. We can open up now to some questions in the time we have remaining. Perhaps we can take them in clusters depending on how many people are game and interested in asking questions. So, does anyone have anything?
Thank you, Naureen, and thank you to the panelists. It was really an excellent panel, and it was mostly very, very interesting. My question is with regards to the depoliticization of the issue of SRHR at the Human Rights Council, because this is what we're talking about. How to make sure that the pressure is not put on just by the civil society organizations operating in Geneva, but also by civil society organizations operating at the national and at the regional levels. Because a lot of the times we can see some discrepancies in behavior by some states in political spaces at the UN with vis-a-vis their own policies at the domestic level. And I think that this is where we would really need the activism of CSOs at the national level, and how to make sure that we have like a holistic approach to our advocacy that really includes, that goes from the bottom up, and to make sure that they are up to date with what is happening in Geneva and in New York, so they don't learn about it at the very last minute and that they have to organize like the day before the vote, for example.
Megan. Thank you very much to all the panelists, and I have to say I feel like a bit of an emotional roller coaster listening to the different panelists, because we hear such wonderful news coming from Chile about the change in the law and the excitement and the women's movements in Chile who have fought for so long to make this happen, and then and listening to how the process happened in Mozambique. And then also recognizing what you said, Ambassador, that we haven't yet won the battle for women and girls' human rights. And so this kind of leads on from Paula's question about the depoliticization, is around what lessons have you learned at the national level in terms of moving this forward, moving the difficult conversations forward, and how could those lessons learned be applied here in the Council?
Muchas gracias a todos los panelistas por sus intervenciones, todas muy interesantes. Y creo que el tema que nos compete más a las delegaciones que trabajan con el Consejo de Derechos Humanos es cómo evitar la politización del tema del aborto legal y seguro y cómo lo podemos abordar para involucrar a los estados que a lo mejor tienen reservas sobre este tema a tener una discusión franca y abierta. Yo creo que la forma de hacerlo es no abordar el tema de una manera confrontacional, ¿no? Un poco como la embajadora Maurás decía sobre la ley de Chile, no es una ley que obliga o que impone ninguna elección, ¿no? Se trata de un proceso que debe devolver la libertad al individuo para tomar las mejores decisiones sobre su vida. Y en este aspecto también creo que es importante subrayar que ninguna de estas iniciativas se trata de la promoción del aborto, es la promoción del derecho de la persona a decidir, porque luego cuando se ve como una promoción del aborto puede ser utilizado muy fácilmente por delegaciones que son contrarias a este tema, enmarcándolo en el falso debate sobre el derecho a la vida. Y yo creo que hay que mantenernos fuera de ese diálogo que no tiene ninguna ventaja para ninguno de los dos lados. Tratando de aterrizar este enfoque de no confrontación y alejándonos de lo que considero un falso debate sobre el derecho a la vida, en resoluciones sobre discriminación de la mujer, en particular una que México y Colombia promueven, tratamos de llamar a los estados a reformar o a derogar esas leyes que por su naturaleza pues discriminan a las mujeres, aunque no se refieran a ellas específicamente. En particular pues las relativas al aborto, porque son profundamente discriminatorias. Tenemos este llamado ahí y también hemos buscado incluir una referencia al aborto legal y seguro, lo cual, pues, como imaginarán, es mucho más complicado. Lo más que hemos podido lograr es incluir una referencia para garantizar el acceso al aborto cuando no es contrario a la legislación nacional, lo cual nos parece que es un avance significativo, sin embargo no sigue siendo lo ideal. Yo creo que en México y Colombia vamos a seguir impulsando porque se incluya esa referencia y para ello necesitamos el apoyo de otras delegaciones, también de organizaciones de la sociedad civil, que como decían, desafortunadamente tienen un espacio que se va reduciendo, pero en el diálogo bilateral con las misiones creo que tienen un impacto muy importante y se ha demostrado en los conceptos que se incluyen en esta resolución específica y en el lobbying que pueden hacer tanto en Ginebra como en sus capitales. Así que, solo para resumir, creo que debemos enfocar estas discusiones en un marco más amplio de promoción de derechos humanos, fomentando de manera paralela los derechos y la salud sexual y reproductiva, incluyendo el acceso a los contraceptivos, a la planificación familiar y a la educación sexual comprensiva, para que no parezca que lo que se está tratando de hacer es promover el aborto, lo cual creo que todos coincidimos que debe ser una experiencia muy difícil para el individuo y para la familia. Entonces creo importante subrayar la importancia de promover estas iniciativas, pero al mismo tiempo, de manera paralela, promover la educación sexual comprensiva, el acceso a la contracepción y a la planificación familiar. Gracias. Perdón, una cosa más, había olvidado. Sobre la importancia de convocar un panel de discusión sobre este tema, creo que sería muy interesante, aunque coincido en que es bastante complicado, tanto por el tema específico, que digamos es explosivo, ¿no?, cuando es negociado entre las delegaciones, como por un tema que no se refiere a los derechos de las mujeres, sino a los recursos cada vez más limitados que tiene el Consejo. Por lo cual todas las delegaciones creo que deben hacer un ejercicio de autocontención cuando se presentan nuevas resoluciones, nuevos paneles, nuevos talleres, y hacer un análisis bien importante sobre cuáles son el valor agregado de cada iniciativa. No estoy prejuzgando sobre el valor de una iniciativa como la que proponen, solo que cuando hay proliferación de iniciativas y recursos limitados, hay que darse cuenta realmente cuáles son las que valen la pena y concentrar las energías y los recursos limitados en ellas. Gracias.
So thank you so much to Mexico, to Megan, and to Paolo for your questions. Let's open this up to the comments and questions. So let's open this up to the panel for responses. I believe we have some.
I'm just going to address the question of sometimes a disconnect in UN spaces and what happens nationally, and in terms of civil society organizations, because I'm literally, feeling you, and I think it's important, for civil society organizations to really work together and communicate with each other. Even if our issues at first glance may not necessarily seem like they are related, but if we're all working towards reproductive justice, then it is all related, and whether it's, by age, discrimination by location or geography, or in terms of access to urban or peri-urban centers, whether it's literally having the money to spend on healthcare, whether you're talking about migrant populations and women specifically who can't access services because they are undocumented. And in South Africa, either it's a proof of address or some form of identification before you can get some services in district hospitals. We need to talk about those conversations amongst each other. So our issues are absolutely related, because your migration issue may very well, deem someone else who requires an abortion service marginalized. So we have to work together and realize that our issues are indeed, intertwined. And we also can't expect of the rest of the community or the world bodies to do for us what we can't even do for ourselves as civil society. So we must communicate. We must challenge each other even beyond the discomfort. So we need to talk about the issues of race. We need to talk about the issues of gender. We need to talk about positionality and who's representing who and for what end. And we need to ask questions about indigenous or native women's organizations who still depend on having a white woman face before they can get funding. So we need to have those discussions within CSOs, and you'll find that some of the divisions are not really because purely of thematic differences, but they may very well be racial, they may very well be gender stuff that we are all too shy to talk about and interrogate. And therefore, again, we can't ask the rest of the world to do what we can do for ourselves internally.
Okay. Thinking on Megan's question and what are the lessons learned, both nationally and internationally. Of course, Chile sponsors and is a fervent supporter of the resolution that was just mentioned by the delegate of Mexico and Colombia on violence against women, and there are also other resolutions that have to do with discrimination against women. That we believe that these form a corpus that is very important to push forward, consistently and very systematically. That is one thing that I think is important. It's also important to be able to understand where do other countries, come from in terms of the issues that have to do with sexual and reproductive rights of women, without it necessarily meaning that the application of these rights or the fulfillment of these rights is relative to anything in particular. Rights are universal, they're interlinked, they are integral, but one has to understand where do we stand when it comes to our national positions and how much we can advance internationally also. So that is something that we all need to be very, very sensitive about. And in that respect, and of course I want to say that one of the biggest lessons that we have learned from this process is that really to be able to conduct a national dialogue, open debate, professional debate, but at the same time very open and transparent and robust in terms of the arguments, no? Is probably what really enabled us in such a short period of time to be able to pass the law that I've described. I just want to say a final thing. Of the legislative process that was followed culminated finally in the Constitutional Tribunal of Chile, which is a tribunal that is not an obligatory pathway for the approval of laws. It is only, any law goes to the Constitutional Tribunal if a congressman requests an examination of the constitutionality. And in this case, of course, the law was passed, but it was immediately challenged and put to the Constitutional Tribunal. And what is interesting is that, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but what I want to highlight are 3 elements of that constitutional ruling that I think we need to have present here in our debates on sexual and reproductive rights. Number 1, the woman is a person. As such, it is a subject of rights. And therefore, it has rights, and the woman can acquire obligations. Number 1. This is, said by the Constitutional Tribunal, and I'm sure we will shout about this for years to come. We are persons. The vote of the majority, recognizes that the women are not a means for something. They're not means. They're not a vessel. No? And therefore, the mother should not be considered as a utilitarian instrument of protection of that who is not born. Spelled out by a constitutional tribunal of a country like Chile. No? And third, it establishes that the Constitution does not provide that who will be born the category of person. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that who is to be born is not a juridical good of the major relevance. And that's because the Constitution actually talks of that who is to be born. I think these 3 constitutional precepts in the case of Chile can be, of course, translated, are very important to keep in mind when we conduct this conversation in other fora.
Gostaria de partilhar, do ponto de vista de experiência no nosso país, portanto em Moçambique, que de facto também foi a primeira vez que fizemos um inquérito ao nível nacional sobre um assunto tão sensível. E apesar dos grupos que visitaram as províncias e os distritos serem multissetoriais, era sempre o setor da saúde que se dirigia à audiência, com o objetivo de os grupos que eram convidados a ouvir e a dar a sua opinião tivessem a noção do que é que estavam, sobre o que queriam opinar. Então nós levávamos dados sobre a mortalidade, levávamos fotos dos instrumentos que as mulheres utilizavam para conseguir interromper a gravidez, levávamos toda a informação que conseguíamos para eles e elas ouvirem e responderem com toda a atenção. O setor da saúde é um setor, acho que em todos os países, os médicos, os enfermeiros são todos mais respeitados. Nós temos poucos médicos, temos muitos enfermeiros e houve um grupo intersetorial dentro da saúde, mas também com elementos do Ministério da Justiça, do Ministério da Mulher, enfim. Uma coisa que aprendemos que eu gostaria de partilhar aqui é que a palavra aborto, quando é pronunciada, tem uma conotação muito negativa. As pessoas reagem logo sem empatia, porque está conotado, em inglês diz-se tainted. Então nós aprendemos desde cedo a substituir por interrupção voluntária da gravidez, que pode ser a mesma coisa para nós, mas para quem ouvia era outra coisa diferente e a discussão era muito mais positiva.
Thank you so much. In light of the time, perhaps we can move to the closing remarks. We have about 5 minutes left, but if each of the panelists had any closing remarks in respect to the conversation we've had today on the theme of safe and legal abortion, opening up for 1 or 2 minutes from each of us. And are we comfortable with going in this direction? Thank you, Ronnie.
Well, I thank you again for having this panel and inviting me to join this group of colleagues. My mind, in the question period, I've sort of got stuck on this issue of depoliticization that came up several times. And I think that is so important at so many different levels. At country level in terms of making progressive policy reforms, law reforms, and then in these international organizations, it's politicized everywhere. It's politicized at WHO to some extent, and other UN organizations as well. And the question about how to depoliticize, I think, is a really important one. And I'm wondering if, as a scientist, I'm wondering if we need more evidence about something that would address this issue of politicization of this particular issue. Abortion is such a common experience worldwide. There are 56 million abortions every year. That's over 100 million every 2 years. It's 1 billion abortions over 20 years. It's such a common experience for women. 1 in 4 women have an abortion in their lifetime. And so it should be just a normal thing. I mean, because for so many women it is. So I don't have the answer. But if people think of research that could help compel this discussion about depoliticization forward, I would really be interested to hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I too think that words are very important. I totally agree with you with regard to how we get, when we speak, how we get heard. And in this particular case, in Chile, we certainly have we use the word or the term voluntary termination of pregnancy, but we also I must say I've listened very carefully to both of you because I'm with some envy because in particular because we in Chile have done this tremendous step, but it has been a very calculated and in a way modest step if one actually thinks of the aspirations that we women, progressive women have, which is to be able to take our decisions anyway, not only because it's prescribed in 3 cases or 4 cases. So this is something that is not gonna, we're not gonna leave it there. We will continue fighting. But in particular, I want to say that the issue of how you defined the conditions with regard to the life of women, the health and life of women, that's a frontier where we want to move. Because for the time being, all we've done is just articulated that one of the cases is when the woman is in vital risk. That's the way we put it, vital risk. But the frontier is really when the woman considers that her health and well-being is at stake. And so we have, places to go. And lastly, I just want to say that something like this, and a piece of legislation like this one, as complex and delicate as it is, really requires enormous effort in terms of putting together what is needed to support the women take the decisions, and the consequences of those decisions. So, and that is another step that we are really very serious about, ensuring that the Ministry of Health does all the strengthening and the training, and it gets the resources to be able to respond at the primary level, at the secondary level, at the tertiary level. And so that is a very serious piece of work that is now being done.
Eu gostaria de agradecer o convite, porque eu não fiz este agradecimento no início, por estar aqui presente, e eu, de certo modo, vim parar de paraquedas, porque a colega que devia ter vindo de Moçambique não conseguiu viajar. Então é muita honra para mim estar aqui neste painel e discutir e partilhar a minha experiência limitada no assunto. Gostaria também de dizer que, apesar de termos feito muita coisa, muito mais ainda está por ser feito. E estou a falar não só em Moçambique, como também os 47 mil mulheres que morrem por causa do aborto inseguro, provavelmente não vão deixar de morrer tão drasticamente nos próximos anos. Então isso significa que temos que definir estratégias, e estratégias que funcionam de modo a alcançar as mulheres mais necessitadas. E costumam ser as mais jovens, mas não só. Mas no meu país a gente diz, a luta continua. Então,
So just in my final remarks, I'd just like to speak to the issue of destigmatization of not just the language of abortion, but in terms of the service itself. And in terms of storytelling, everyone is always looking for another story, and I frankly think there are enough abortion stories out there for people to do the right thing by women. And our vaginas have become not just political, but a political ping-pong ball. When anyone needs to show how strong they are politically, it's women's rights first who always are under attack. And that's where the fight happens. So we can't look at depoliticization or destigmatization and not look at it through a sexism lens. We can't look at it through a patriarchal attitude that generally the world hates women. And that everyone thinks because you have a vagina they can tell you what to do and what not to do. And that society rates itself by how well the women in that society are well behaved. And that has to end. And that really goes beyond just policy. It's really, and I think men who are feminist allies shouldn't perform their allyship within women's spaces. They need to go tackle that patriarchy. And that's where the battle for things like politicization of a legitimate medical service and how we as people are pro-choice are so fixated with being nice and playing nice and we need to be diplomatic. I think people who are anti-choice don't sit and tell each other and police each other about how nice and how well played they need to come across. And that's the issue, that we've even lost all language pro-life. We are pro-life. We are the ones who are pro-quality of life. We are pro-quality of life that's dignified. But we've allowed that language to go over to people who are anti-choice. And it's for this reason that I'm absolutely resistant in terms of the language we use. An abortion is an abortion. You're stopping a pregnancy. It is a legitimate medical procedure. And of course, depending on which space you occupy and who's your audience, you will very well alter your language. You will use maybe different statistics. Maybe you'll have an economical sort of lens to how you're presenting an abortion, perhaps as a capitalist thing, if you're talking to medical aid, for example. And therefore, I think we should be very careful that we will end up eventually with absolutely no language to use, because we are then scared of naming things and calling them what they are. And medicine is a science. It's a science. It's not a feeling. It's not evangelism. It is a science. And we need to respect that science and believe in that science so that we can then be bold to call things what they are. So as we move on, I would just like to say that we do need to look at focusing and really having these policies and these laws directly impacting on people's ability to have access. If you're doing research, if you're doing funding, if you're doing training, whatever it is that we are all involved in, if that doesn't directly translate into people having access, maybe let's stop and rethink, why are we doing what we're doing? Because every single thing we're doing has to directly result in people having equitable access. And that's, yeah, thank you.
That was all wonderful. I would like to thank everyone, keeping in mind that we're running a little late. Thank you so much again to our panelists, to Ambassador Perez, to Dr. Mofokeng, Dr. Ramal, and to Mr. Johnson. Thank you to the Sexual Rights Initiative for organizing, and OHHR for making these remarks and your support. And to the co-sponsors as well. Thank you to all of you for attending and for your questions and engagement. And just to emphasize, the Global Day of Action for Access to Safe and Legal Abortion being September 28th. And perhaps something to keep in mind and take away from this is the words of the Constitutional Tribunal the Ambassador was mentioning, that the woman is a person and a subject of rights. Thank you.